Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Rhodes College, and I'm here tonight with Brad Schiller, founder, CEO, co-founder, CEO of Prompt.com. I am just going to highlight Brad and myself so that you can see us amongst the sea of everybody else who's joining tonight. There we go. Okay, so more people are going to continue to join, but it's a little over 8 o'clock and we're just going to get started, and I'll start with some housekeeping first. Let me make sure. Okay. Let me make sure that I have everybody, coming in from the waiting room. Oh no, here we are. Okay. So if you've joined before, you know that we do these as meetings because it's just nice, even as things are opening up with the end of COVID. It's nice to see people's faces as we do virtual events. We also are okay if you want to raise your hand and ask a question as opposed to putting it into the chat, but also feel free to put any questions into the chat. And we did, but it just is right now. If you can keep yourself muted, so I'm gonna mute as long as you can, unless you want to ask us a question. And we did ask in the registration for the event if anybody had an essay that they wanted us to use to review. We actually had one person send it in, but then they kind of took it back, which is okay. I'm just opening it up again, and I know it's a little early in the season. Maybe your student doesn't have an essay yet, but if they do, even in a draft form, and you want to still send it in, feel free to shoot me an email right now at debbie@rhodescollege.com, or even shoot it to Brad at prompt.com. And it's just always a little bit more fun to kind of use a real, everything that we show is real, but but to show,
just from one that's actually somebody's here tonight with, other than just like another essay that we would have selected. That's all.
Yeah. Right. So just putting it out there one last time, if you want to send that, we can still use it tonight. And we did collect, a lot of people put in topics that their student is thinking about, writing about, and we're going to talk about those topics as well. So just want you to know that whatever you share with us is not going to waste. We're going to use the information. And the last thing I always love if you guys can put into the chat. I'm assuming most of the people here are seniors. Has your student started the essay yet? Where are you in the process? Maybe they're just thinking about it. I'm sure you're still working on college lists. Maybe this is the major summer activity, which I'm sure it is if you have a senior.
Yeah. Also, I like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you about essays? So 10 being the most concerned, 1 being not concerned at all. A lot of 10s.
Ooh,
a lot of 10s.
All of a sudden, a lot of 10s. Yep.
Awesome. Well, that makes sense because people are here tonight. So that's
right.
why we're
I saw somebody said still brainstorming. It is perfectly fine.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's the perfect opportunity to be joining this evening, because that means you're not wasting a lot of time doing stuff that's not going to yield results or return.
Somebody put in a 10.5.
It's a little intense. I was expecting maybe a 100 or something, Yeah. But Debbie, you have any other housekeeping stuff, or?
Yeah, two other quick things.
Yeah.
The way we've structured the sessions is, Brad, we have a ton of good information to share. Brad's going to share. We'll talk about, some of the essay topics people have sent in. We do have a sample essay that Brad's going to go through. And then at 9 o'clock, if there are families here with students that are really interested in applying to, honestly, the more selective, like even the uber selective schools, we're going to talk more specifically about, essays and how it relates to the students who are going after really selective colleges. So that's up to you. You can stay around and continue listening at 9, but if not, we'll have gone through the bulk of what, you'll need to know.
Yeah, and you don't have to stick around if you don't want to. A lot of times we just take a lot of like very specific questions about like very highly selective institutions at that point, and a lot of the information we go over ahead of time is directly applicable to those institutions, but really all colleges that you'll be applying to. All right, so I think that's, yeah, you have another one.
Okay.
Yeah. I forgot we haven't done number 2 yet.
Yes, this is recorded, but stick around. But if you want to watch it later, we'll send the recording. And the last thing is, and you're going to get an email about this pretty soon, and we're going to mention it, but I am really being honest. We've worked with Prompt for several years, but we've worked with them tonight to offer you guys the best prices on any services that Prompt has. And we have a special going till Sunday, but tonight is extra special. So just putting it out there. There is no pressure, but I just want people to know if you're ever thinking about it, this is the best pricing that's going to be available, and it's going to be available tonight. I mean, if you go on, and I'll put the link now, it's probably there now, and it will be available.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's prompt.com/road to college. So and we'll talk a little bit more about that kind of as we go. But we actually supported hundreds of Road to College families last year. A lot of success with that, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But we offer small group essay boot camps and one-on-one coaching just for, let's say, the common application personal statement essay, or for every essay that you need to write across all of your schools or just a few schools. And we'll talk more about that as we go. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to roll through a bunch of content and that sort of thing. Please drop into the chat or into, yeah, I guess it's into the chat. Any questions that you may have along the way. Debbie is always interrupting me with additional stuff that we should be covering that somehow I forget. So feel free to do that basically as we go. But in terms of what are we going to cover today, first, we're going to talk about how colleges evaluate applicants. The most important thing when you're writing anything is to consider your audience. Okay, so what do they actually care about, so we can figure out what we're going to write about. The second is what colleges are and aren't looking for in essays, the ideal timeline you're going to work on for your applications. We're going to do an intro to our essay coaching, plus this tonight only discount, which I think in some cases it's like there's one option that's like $50 and $100, $200 extra off. Highly recommend taking advantage of that if you're considering this at all. And then live feedback on an essay that somebody is now sending in, as I see from the chat. So we will do that. And we'll get to the deep dive on highly selective colleges. So just a really quick brief on us, and you can take a look at some information at prompt.com/road to college during the session if you want to. But last year we coached 6,000 students one-on-one on their college application essays, okay, including hundreds of Road to College families. We'll talk more about the success that we have there. But generally speaking, one thing to keep in mind is that when we work with students, 3 in 4 students that we work with get into one or more of their reach colleges. So those are highly selective schools, or schools where they have the applicants have an academic profile below that of the average admitted student. So that's like an unheard of result, and you'll start seeing why we have such good success there as we go, because as we start learning about what colleges are actually looking for in applications, and then how do you actually write about those things, that's what we're going to be talking about right now. Okay. All right. So what do admissions officers actually care about? All right. Well, in short parlance, what they care about is that your student will succeed in college and after they graduate. Okay. So the entire admissions application process is really about identifying potential. Okay, the potential that your student will do well in college, in other words, get pretty good grades, graduate college, contribute to the community in some way in college. Those are measures of success, right? Obviously, colleges want you to graduate because that means you pay tuition for at least 4 years, right? And that matters to them. But it also matters in terms of their graduation rates affect their US News rankings and many other things like that. And they also want students to do well after they graduate, because students that do well have a very positive impression of that college. So they tell their friends, they tell their friends' kids, tell everybody that to go to that college, right? Which reflects well on that college. And then, if they happen to make some money, they can donate money back to the college, and that also helps the college. So these are all the things that the colleges actually care about, right? They want to know by reading the application that there's a very high probability that your student will be successful in college and after they graduate. That's what they're looking for. Now, in terms of how do they evaluate that, okay? There's a few things that they take into consideration. So first, they take into consideration this like academic score, which we'll spend a little bit of time on, but basically they have an algorithm where they're taking like your grades, the strength of curriculum you've taken, your test scores, which maybe if you're taking the SAT or ACT, those get included. If you're applying test optional, they don't, but it might be AP scores if you're an IB program. And then they also consider context, okay, such as like the high school that you attended and how students from that high school may have done at that college that you're applying to in the past, okay? So that's on the academic side. And then we have the personal score, which is basically everything that's non-admissions related. This is where essays come in, okay? This is the activities that you've done and how you write about those activities, right? The essays, which is like what you've done and how you write about it. So content really matters, but also how you're writing about your content really matters. Recommendations, maybe if you have an interview, that's there. And then there's other priorities, which we're not really going to focus too much on today, because they're things that you really can't affect too much at this point. But one of them is like demonstrated interest. So, hey, you actually want to attend the school. So if they let you into the school, you're going to attend. That matters to a lot of schools. It might matter for like family income, whether or not, so if you're going to pay full tuition or you need a discount or that sort of thing, some schools take that into consideration, some don't. First generation students, geography, legacies, athletes, there's so many other considerations, but those are things that are less likely for you to affect at this time. And even academics are less likely for you to affect at this point if you're a rising senior. So what really matters and what are the things that you can really have a significant impact on right now is the personal score, because it's also the most amorphous. It's the hardest to actually explain to the reader of your application, right? There's no like hard stats, right, on the personal score. And so how does this broadly work? Okay, so the easiest way to look at this is there's two scores, right? The academic score and the personal score. Basically, colleges have what we call an academic bar, okay? And what that means is that as long as you have a certain academic profile that's above the academic bar, that means that college believes that you have the academic capabilities to succeed at that college, okay? So once you're above the bar, you're in good shape, all right? If you're way above the bar, you're in better shape, but the key is to be above that bar. All right. Then there's also the personal score and the personal bar, right? These are all the non-academic side of things that we just talked about. And if you're below the personal bar, you're probably not getting admitted. It's very rare, and very few people, as we'll see in a second, are actually below the personal bar. But the higher you are kind of above that personal bar, the higher your admissions chances are, as we'll see in a minute, right? So this is like relatively simple concept or framing, but this is the simplest way to look at admissions. Now, different colleges have different complexities in the admissions process, but most of them you can boil down to this, right? Academics and non-academics, all right? So how do both of these kind of come into play? Okay, so the key with academics is, and a lot of people don't really realize this, is that what it really comes down to is that strong academics is not enough, because there are far more academically qualified applicants at most schools than they actually have spots to attend those schools. That doesn't just go for the highly selective institutions. That goes for the vast majority of institutions, okay? And the reason for that is, roughly speaking, at any college that you apply to, 4 in 5 of the applicants are considered above the academic bar. In other words, that college believes they're academically capable of doing the work at that college. Okay, this goes for Harvard, MIT, Stanford, it goes for UPenn, it goes for Michigan, it goes for all of the schools. Okay, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Virginia Tech, it goes for all of them. This is a good rule of thumb. Okay, and this is actually what the data from admissions officers show. Okay, and so why is this? Why is this the case? And it's because there's a lot of information out there. So when you're putting your school lists together of where you're applying, you're generally thinking about it from an academic point of view, right? You're looking at what courses you've taken, what grades you've gotten, what test scores maybe you have. and you're saying, hey, my test scores are kind of in line with what other applicants that went in, got into X school, had, right? So you're kind of self-selecting where you're applying based off of those metrics, right? And that's why pretty much at every school, roughly speaking, 4 and 5 applicants are academically capable of doing the work. Now, about half of those, right, so 2 and 5 applicants have strong academics, okay? And pretty much most schools just bucket them all together, right? Because it's very hard to discern between, somebody that scores, let's say, I'm just going to use the SAT because it's something that a lot of people generally have a sense of. The difference between somebody getting like a 1500 on the exam and a 1510 is basically irrelevant, right? The same goes for, somebody that took, 10 AP exams and got like not, 5 5s, 4 4s and a 3, right? Versus somebody that got, 4 5s, 5 4s and a 3 or whatever, right? There's very little difference, okay? And so they can't tell, right? So they just bucket them all together, right? And so what the key is though, is like, guess what? That's still 2 and 5 applicants. That's 40% of all applicants. And when you look at the admission rates at a lot of these institutions, guess what? The admissions rates are not 40%, right? They are far below that in many cases, sometimes 4%, okay? And so this really matters. So how are you differentiating between the students that are strong academically or even sufficient academically? Because guess what? If you're sufficient, you can still do the work at the college, so they might accept you, all right? And by the way, where you see exceptional, the reason why you don't see much there is because almost nobody's exceptional, all right? That's what it comes down to. That's actually what the data shows. It's like far less than 1%. It's like 0.5% or something. All right, so what does this mean? That means essays, the non-academic side of your application really matters at a lot of schools, okay? And basically what this is that means it's like very critical to this. And why is this? Is that even amongst students, you're also selecting where you're applying based off of, hey, I have a lot of activities. Oh, other students that are applying to this college also have a lot of activities. So in a pool of really highly qualified, highly motivated applicants, only 1 in 5 applicants actually set themselves apart as being strong. So in a pool of sometimes very highly motivated applicants or applicants with relatively similar activity type profile or extracurricular profiles, 1 in 5 have figured out a way to set themselves apart. And we're going to talk about how to do that in a little bit. But this is really important because guess what? Having strong academics compared to sufficient academics can increase your admissions chances by 3x, but having strong non-academics increases your admissions chances 10x. Okay, and this is what the actual data is from Harvard, which the only reason why we know this is because there's currently a Supreme Court case associated with Harvard, and I went through literally thousands of court case documents to distill all of this down and really understand the entire dynamics of those admissions processes at highly selective institutions. And I've read a lot and talked to a lot of admissions officers at all of the other institutions as well, many other institutions. And this is really what it boils down to, right? And by the way, it's sometimes really hard to know if you actually have strong academics or not when you're applying to a given school, just because of the, it's not like a lot of these schools release a lot of that information, right? You can sometimes get a decent sense of it by looking at, what are the typical test scores of admitted students? Like what is the top quartile of admitted students? But the GPA, a lot of times that they might publish, the average GPA of an admitted student, it's like 3.9 or 4.1. It's like, well, what's the measure, right? It's hard to know and compare a student at your high school versus the rest of the high schools. And so it's very difficult to tell like whether or not you would have a strong academic profile in many cases. So what does this mean? We're going to talk about when essays matter and when they don't really quick. This should be really helpful in terms of framing how you think about, hey, how much time do you want to invest in essays? Do you want essay, to get essay coaching or support, that sort of thing? And basically what it boils down to is essays really matter if you're applying to highly selective colleges. So think of admissions rates, 15% and below, okay? Essays really matter for selective colleges, 15 to 50% admission rates, where your academics are just sufficient but not strong compared to other applicants. And as I said, it's sometimes really hard to know, where are you? Okay. And then large colleges where you're applying to highly desirable programs, such as like a computer science program or an engineering program, or you're applying to like highly desirable out-of-state destinations, right? So University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill is a good example of this. It could be University of Michigan for engineering, University of Washington for computer science, right? If you look at the academic profiles of the students that are accepted to some of these programs, they tend to be much higher than the general population at the school, because there's a limited, it's almost like you're applying to that specific program and not to the school itself in many cases, right? Because they're taking a certain number of applicants. Even at schools that somewhat don't have a specific major you apply to, such as like an Ivy League institution, at Harvard, for example, and I'm only using this once again as an example just because they had to release their data. If you're applying to be a teacher, you have actually a 12% admit rate. If you're applying to be and your future goal is to be in medicine, you have like a 4% admit rate. It's like literally a 3x difference. Okay. And there's reasons for that, which is, what makes this college successful, right? And what they're looking for in terms of people with varying backgrounds or varying interests, which we'll get into more. But that does really matter. So the different types of programs. Essays matter less for if you're applying for a selective college, so let's say 15 to 50% admit rate, where academics are strong compared to other applicants. So if you're applying to like Georgia Tech and you have really strong academics, a lot of times they just do not care about the essays because they just accept a lot more students than many other schools that have a similar number of applicants, right? Or large colleges where you're applying in-state or applying to less competitive programs, right? So if you're applying to a psychology program, for example, at your local state college, that may have essays may matter a little less for that program compared to just going straight off the academics. Okay. All right. So before we get into the specifics of what to write about in your essays, we're going to talk about how many essays you're going to write. Because this is, if you haven't had a student that's applied to college recently, it's a little bit of a shocker sometimes. Okay. So if you're applying to less selective colleges, and this is just general rule of thumb, is 50+% admit rates. You might need to write one essay. The common application essay is the most common, or you might not write any essays. You're going to write an activities list. You're going to write additional information section. You're not going to write what we call these supplements, or these extra special essays that certain schools have that they want you to write. Okay. It doesn't mean that they don't have them. Like Virginia Tech, for example, is a fantastic institution, but it also has like a 70% admit rate. But they have 2 supplemental essays to write, 2 extra essays to write. Then selective colleges, a lot of students that are applying to those under 50% admit rates might be writing 5 to 20 total essays across what they have to do. Okay. Because a lot of schools have extra essays that you're like, hey, I want you to write, about like why you want to apply to this school is a very common one. Okay. And those are extra, what we call supplemental essays, or it might be for an honors program at that school. It might have extra essays that you need to write. Okay. That's very common. And then for highly selective essays, a lot of students that we work with are writing 40, sometimes 50 or 60 essays. Okay. Now, a lot of those essays have overlap. So in other words, the content, you can take one essay and you can modify it for another essay for a school, but it's usually not directly transferable, right? So usually it's not like I can literally copy and paste the exact same thing over a lot of times, okay? Some schools have 8 essays. Like Stanford has a bunch of like 50-word essays, and then they have some longer ones too, right? So just a lot of writing, a lot of essays that a lot of students have to do. And as we'll talk about later, that's a lot of work for students, but working with a coach can enable you to work a lot smarter and a lot more efficiently and have better outcomes. Okay.
Hey, Brad.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a question just because like relative to the number of essays gonna write. Somebody would actually a little early on was asking, is there a difference between the personal essay and the why us essay?
Yes, I mean it's a big difference in terms of like the content that you're writing. And the why us essay, a lot of schools have them. And it has to be unique and different for each school, right? Because why are you applying to that specific school?
That's what adds up to all of these.
Yeah, that's what adds up to a lot of these different ones. And they're all asking for sometimes slightly different things, right? So the personal statement the most common version of that's the common application essay, right? And so you usually use that across a lot of different institutions or a lot of different schools that you're applying to. But it's these extra essays, which, by the way, matter just as much as the.
Well, that's what I wanted you to emphasize, is that, like,
it's the same. Yeah. It's
sometimes as students, they put more emphasis or a lot of work, which they should, into the Common App essay. And they're like, oh, the supplemental essays, it's 250 words, it's not as important. But it actually, those sometimes end up being more important than even the Common App essay.
Yeah, a lot of times they are, right. You're kind of, I was joking, it's like, look, it's not like you write a great Common App essay and they're not like, this gets a 10 out of 10, right? Or 100 out of 100, on the score. And then they look at your other essay and they're like, oh, that other essay is only worth 10 points. Oh, that one's not so good, 5 out of 10, right? And it's not like they add up all those scores and like, oh, well, the personal statement essay was so good, we're just gonna, let you in. Like, that's not really how it works, right? It's kind of like looking at the application in totality and how all these different pieces fit together. And so what we find is one of the most frequent things that occurs is actually 90+% of applicants submit their applications within 48 hours of the deadline. Okay. And why are they doing that? A lot of times it's because they're not done with these extra essays yet. And we find that students tend to perseverate, which means they just kind of keep thinking about, working on that sort of thing. Just the common application essay, they procrastinate on it. Comes around to October, they're still kind of working on that, finishing it up. They haven't even thought about the supplemental.
They don't even realize how many.
They may not have even looked at how many they have to write. And now we're talking about days before the application, and you're running to us and you're like, hey, can we get some help? Which we try to help people. But like that last week before the November 1st early action, early decision deadlines is crazy. And you don't want to be that family, right? You don't want to be stressing about that. You want to just get most of these essays done. Most of the students we work with are done with their essays for their top 3 choice schools by the time their senior year starts. Okay. And then they like make some modifications to it if they need to, if they've had more experiences that they want to add to their applications, but it's way less stressful. That's kind of the goal. Don't be the procrastinators, right? Don't just be kind of thinking about the essay, not confident in what you're writing about and that sort of thing. So what are colleges actually looking for in essays, right? We just talked about the entire purpose is to prove that your student will succeed in college and after they graduate. So how do you do that? And what's interesting is that most of the time, your student is probably being told, and you may be being told this as well, that essays are about telling your story. And guess what? All of our friendly neighborhood admissions officers are really good at propagating this myth, because they also tell you that, hey, we just want to get to know you. Oh, we just want you to hear your story, etc. But guess what? That's totally incomplete information. It just is. Because guess what? Essays are about telling your story that actually proves you'll be successful in college and beyond. Okay? This is what you really want to do. This is what you really want to focus on. Because what ends up happening is a lot of students are here, oh, I want to tell my story. Then they read an example of an essay that is about somebody's family culture. And they're like, hey, maybe I should write about my family culture and like the smells of the food in our kitchen, right? And guess what? They write that essay, but that actually is not meaningful to them. That doesn't prove they're going to be successful in college and beyond at all. And then the admissions officer is reading this and it's just like, not another essay about the foods, smells of food in the kitchen, right? That's cooking, right? And you'd be surprised the number of essays that I read that are literally that exact essay. Because, you see an example of an essay online, students are like, hey, this was a successful essay, and they don't pick out the things that actually made that essay successful, which are the things that actually prove the students will be successful in college and beyond. They pick out the beautiful language, these like vivid scenes, that sort of thing. That's what they're picking out. They're picking out the storytelling or what they think is the storytelling and not the stuff that actually is what the college admissions officers are looking for. And so this is what admissions officers are actually looking for. So I saw some people with like the little cameras and taking pictures. This is an important one to do. This is probably the single most important slide in this entire presentation, right? These are the 5 traits that colleges are looking for in applicants. These are the 5 traits that prove that you'll be successful in college and beyond. And why do these 5 traits matter? Well, if you think about when you might be looking for a job, or people that are looking for jobs, or you're hiring people or whatever, these are the exact same traits that you're also looking for, right? Because you're looking for people that have had experiences in the past that have exhibited these traits, that therefore identify that you are likely to have these traits or exhibit these traits in the future and therefore succeed, right? That's what it comes down to. So let's talk about these. So the first is drive, and this is the single most important one, which is basically students that whenever they're placed in a difficult or a challenging situation, they're going to succeed. And not only are they just like, they're not just like passively sitting by, right? They're not doing that. What they're doing is they're going through difficult situations. They're taking actions that are bettering their situation, and they're coming out a better person as a result of it, okay? Schools love driven students. And the reason why they love driven students is because these students are going to encounter challenging situations in college, and they don't want those kids to drop out, right? They want them to keep pushing and succeed and graduate, right? Number one. And number two is they're going to have challenging situations in life too, right? So they want those like really gritty, perseverant students. A lot of admissions officers talk about grit, right? It's the same thing as drive, really driven students. When I was talking to the dean of admissions from MIT, Stu Schmill, a number of years ago, we were talking about the 5 traits. And one of the things that always stood out to me when we were talking about these is like, you know what? In a pool of exceptionally driven applicants that I have, exceptionally driven applicants, what I'm looking for is the student that is unusually driven, right? So it's even more driven than the most driven, right? And the only way to identify that is through the student's writing. Really, ultimately, unless they're like the world chess champion, right? Like, or something like that, right? Which most students are not, right? Where they have like some crazy big award where they're like, yeah, that was so successful. Like, yeah, they probably have all of these traits, because you can't get that far without being exceptionally driven, right? Those are the types of things. But your writing and what you have done or what the student has done can really identify and show these traits. And drive is a really important one. I only bring up MIT because I went to MIT, so and now I run a writing company. Makes a lot of sense, right? Doesn't make any sense at all, but enough for story for a different day. Second is intellectual curiosity. So these are students that love learning just for the fun of it in their free time to gain a deeper understanding of subjects or topics in which they're interested in, okay? A lot of students are really intellectually curious, and they have no idea that they should be writing about this on their applications, okay? Not only that, the students actually, what's super interesting is a lot of times when I'm talking with students, they don't even realize that they're intellectually curious. They have no idea, because it's just normal for them to be learning about certain things or engaging with their friends about certain topics. Or in some cases, like students I've worked with in the past have literally been building like rockets, right? Or robotics, right? Or, are writing, like doing a lot of writing or engaging in research or all sorts of different things, right? And they don't realize that they shouldn't even be writing about some of these things. But colleges love intellectually curious students. They love it so much that at Stanford, for example, they have a supplemental essay that they have that's literally about intellectual curiosity. At Emory University, their personal score that they have when they score applicants is actually called intellectual curiosity. It's not called the personal score, right? This is why it really matters. Students that are intellectually curious are going to obviously succeed in college, right? They're going to just continue learning, and they're going to succeed in life, right? Being a lifelong learner is really important. Third is students that take the initiative. These are very entrepreneurial students, not willing to accept the status quo. And basically, no matter what part of an organization they're in or what group of people they're a part of, anytime they're kind of looking out and seeking out, like, here's ways that I can make what I'm a part of better. And not only are they identifying those things, they're actually acting on making it better. Okay, so these are like the leaders. Whether or not you have a formal leadership role is irrelevant. It's the people that actually get stuff done, okay, and make things better. Why do colleges love these people? Because guess what? They're the ones that come into the campus community, and they make the community better as a result of their being there. And they make that community better, that after they leave, right, what they leave behind has made the school and community better, right? They love that. Fourth is contribution. So these are students that no matter what group of people they're a part of, that group is better as a result of their being there. A lot of times I think of these as like the super connectors, right? The people that are like the connective tissue across large groups of people. Colleges love these people because they're the connective tissue of the campus, right? Colleges know that their product of what they're selling, of why students are coming there, has only a little bit to do with the actual education that the students get. Right? A lot of it's the community that they're a part of, the lifelong connections that they're building with other friends and alumni that they're going to have at that school. And that's what they're paying for. So that's why a lot of schools want to make sure there's enough of these connectors, these connective tissue, so that adds a ton of value to everybody at the campus. And the fifth is diversity of experiences, right? So different students have different ways of thinking about the world based off of different experiences that they may have that can add unique perspectives to the student body, and they can share with each other. Not only is that, usually the experiences that you may have had in your past may have an effect on what you want to do in the future. And most colleges, they don't want every single student, even Princeton doesn't want every single student going into like Wall Street, right? They want their students to go do a lot of different things because they want to have their footprint in every, in a lot of different, industries. They want their footprint sometimes in, a lot of different geographies, right? They want to have an impact on the world, right? So they want students that have a lot of these different unique experiences, different things that they want to go do in the future, et cetera. And that also really matters to them, okay? And so within your essays, you want to make sure that you're hitting on not necessarily all of these 5 traits. You want to hit on at least 2 or 3 of your strengths, okay? And a lot of times students will exhibit all of these traits at different points in their essays, but they will focus more on their strengths. And sometimes within essays, like let's say, that MIT example I was giving, they're looking for unusually driven students. So you don't want just like one example of drive sometimes. You want to be like, hey, in this situation, I was really driven. In this other situation, I was really driven. In this other situation, I was also really driven. Basically, no matter what you put me in, I'm just going to be like the most driven person there, okay? And that's like a way to approach an application where you're kind of just hitting your admissions officer kind of over the head with like, I'm driven. See, I'm really, really driven. Yep, I'm really driven. I also am a little bit intellectually curious, and I'm also taking the initiative a little bit, but my brand is like, I'm the super driven person, right? Or I'm the super intellectually curious person, or literally I just make everything better around me, right? Those are the types of things that you want to have, come across, okay? Do you have questions on this stuff or things that have come up? We're going to take a look at some topics that everybody has sent in just a minute. And actually kind of look at those, like how do you write those topics associated with these 5 traits? But we'll take a look at that in a minute. But Debbie, anything that's come in?
Actually, I answered this, but a few people have said, when should I start?
Oh, we'll get to that.
Okay.
The answer is now, but we'll get to that. One of the things that I'll just highlight is what this means is when we talk about these 5 traits, and we'll see this when we actually take a look at the topics, there's actually no such thing as a bad topic for an essay, provided it relates to one or more of these 5 traits. Now, there's definitely things that are a little bit more difficult to write about than others, okay?
And actually, somebody did ask, Brad, what happens if there are 1 or 2 traits that are difficult to comment on in my essay? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, that's totally fine, right? And sometimes it's like, you can kind of see it in the essay, but it's not explicit, right? It's like implicit within the essay, and it's totally fine. Like you really want to focus on your 2 to 3 strengths, not just in one essay, but across your entire application, right? Is what you want to do. But as I say, no such thing as a bad topic, right? So there's some things that are harder to write about. That tends to be athletics, that tends to be like band, music, theater, basically non-academic oriented things, okay? But those are also a lot of times great opportunities to be showing initiative and drive, and sometimes intellectual curiosity in terms of building your own skills and learning how to build your skills that can be really compelling. The essay that's like, hey, I was really tired in the game, so I dug down deep and scored the game-winning goal. That's not an interesting essay. That shows none of the 5 traits. But an essay that's about athletics where it's like, hey, I wasn't a very good player my freshman year. Like I rode the bench, right? But by senior year, I was, my junior year, I was like a starter on the team, right? And we happened to win the championship, but here's how I got there, right? I, spent a lot of time, hours outside of practice improving my skills. Like I watch videos on YouTube of like Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, like, and their different moves. I learned their different moves. I practiced their moves. And it just so happened to be at the single most important moment of the entire season. I broke out one of those moves and it worked. And I scored the game-winning goal, and we won the championship, right? Now, all of a sudden, that essay is about drive, that essay is about intellectual curiosity, and the scoring of the game-winning goal to win the championship shows the result of all the hard work that the person put in, right? Completely different essay, okay? But a lot of people might tell you, don't write about athletics. But then again, that was a great essay about athletics, okay? So once again, it's really not, there's a bad topic to write about as long as it You just need to relate to one or more of the 5 traits. The other thing that I'm just going to highlight, because a lot of students really struggle with this, is what do we just learn, right? It's about the 5 traits. It's about your content. So in other words, what that means is that your content, the clarity with which you write, and the readability that of your writing are critical. And the creativity and the beauty of your prose are not. So when we find that if you take a student and you have your student even look at an example of an essay, and you're saying, hey, here's a college admissions essay that worked. Why did it work? What they'll say is, oh, look at that like great metaphor that it had at the beginning of the essay. Or look at that beautiful language or prose that was written. And guess what? The audience does not care about that at all. Okay. Is it nice to have that because it's more fun to read? Yeah, sure. Why not? But at the end of the day, zero impact on the on like these different 5 traits, right? And so that's really important. And what happens is a lot of times when students try to write with metaphors and try to write in this different way that they think is helpful, their clarity of their writing and the readability really suffer. So the admissions officer is reading the essay, and at the beginning of the essay, they're like, I don't understand how any of this is relevant. And once they think that, you're kind of done. Okay, because an admissions officer is spending 8 minutes per application reading that application. Okay, and they're reading a lot of applications per day. So once they'll read the rest of the essay. And I do this too. Like I'll look at the beginning of the essay and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to read the rest of this essay. I really just don't want to read it. This is going to be terrible. And then like I get towards the end of the essay, I'm like, oh, there's actually something kind of interesting here. But my mind has kind of gone blank on the rest of the essay, and I have to go back and kind of reread it. And like, I have to figure out how to solve the essay in terms of like, what is the student even trying to say? Don't let your admissions officer have to figure that out. That's bad. Because most admissions officers aren't going to put that time in, right, to figure that out, right? You need to be extremely clear, have very high readability, makes it very easy to read. And we can talk more about that in detail, but probably don't have time today. And then the content is what really matters, right? That's the stuff that's going to prove that your experiences in the past basically will signal experiences in the future. I talked about this a little bit before, but every single essay you write is important. Every piece of the application is important, including the activities list, which, by the way, every single admissions officer says reading activities lists are terrible because nobody knows how to write the actual, you have 150 characters to explain what you did, right, in the activity, okay? Guess what? There's good ways to do that. And then there's the ways pretty much everybody does it. And so you can actually have a significant, substantial advantage by just doing a good job there. Right? And so, it's really all these different pieces of the application kind of being put together that prove that you'll be successful is really important. Okay, so we have any questions, or we're going to talk about a little bit about some topics now, and then we're going to talk about the ideal timeline for how you should be working on this. And then we're going to get into our essay coaching, then we'll dive into an example essay. Okay. Debbie, was there anything else that came up?
I'm sorry, I was answering a question, so I don't know if you answered this about, are there real hardcore topics to avoid, or is it really just
in general.
And there was actually a question a little earlier about also, writing about mental health.
Yeah, mental health. So anything that has to do with like mental health, or sometimes it could be like eating disorders or those types of things can be really challenging to write about. And the reason for that is, think about what colleges are looking for. They're looking for students that are going to be successful in college and beyond. And anything that you're including basically in your application that signals you it may be at risk of being successful in college and beyond can be a negative on the application. Now, I've seen a lot of essays that are also still really good on those topics, right? But those are generally where, hey, you have had kind of some, anxiety or depression or that sort of thing, and you've kind of found your way through that and resulted, came out like, have dramatically like taken actions to improve like your personal situation, such that a college will look at this and be like, wow, this student's really been through something. And like, because they've been through this challenging situation, they're going to be more likely to succeed in the future. Okay. But that tends to be very difficult for a student to write about in a way that the colleges will actually be like, come out of that and be like, yeah, 100% the student is ready to rock at my college, right? And so that tends to be challenging. And I know a lot of students that have, have gone through these sorts of things, want to write about it because they feel like, hey, I'm supposed to tell my story, right? Or the story that matters most to me. But once again, what do we learn, right? They want a story that's going to prove you'll be successful in college and beyond, right? That's really ultimately what they're looking for. If you want some catharsis, in writing about that, write your own kind of personal essay and share it with your friends or yourself or that sort of thing. Don't send it to the college, right? But it's still a really good exercise for a lot of students that are going through or been through those types of situations. Okay.
But do you have any thing to share about if students are applying to like art schools? Do art schools tend to have the same type of essays, same number of essays?
Yeah. Usually there's extra writing that the student needs to do a lot of times, depending on the school, because you're writing like an artist statement. And an artist statement is really about who you are as an artist. That's the easiest way to think about that. And we work with a lot of students that are applying to, all sorts of different kind of like very creative programs that they're submitting what are called like portfolios, where they have to do like an artist statement, whether or not that's, all sorts of different types of art, right? Even like videography and, all sorts of different stuff like that. But there's definitely writing there, and different schools care about different things, so they might give more weight to like the artist statement than to other components of the essay of the application. But it just depends on the institution to where you're applying. Yeah.
And there was like 2 years ago an essay instituted because of COVID, right? Like it was.
Yeah, at this point, relatively few people are now writing that. And it's really not just about COVID. It's about like, hey, you or your family have been through some like very difficult situations. Sometimes it's natural disasters or that sort of thing. And you want to make the admissions committee aware of it. But I have not seen we have significantly and substantially fewer students writing that as back in, whereas like the majority of students were writing that back in like, 2020 to 2021, essentially.
Okay, and one more question. Well, this is a good one, and then we go on to the.
Cool, let's do it.
Someone said, I feel the topics shown are all about overcoming something. I know a lot of people feel that way, like, you have to share that you overcome something, insurmountable, and that's why, you've got a story to share. But so this person is asking, can the student show their personality by writing about what's important to them, such as I hated by. I think they missed up a word here, but something about, I hated my trip to France because the food was dumbed down by Americans. Do you think that that's still as powerful, or maybe there's a different way of expressing that?
Yeah. So the reason why, you'll see something that's like overcoming a challenge or overcoming a difficult situation is because what they're truly trying to get at is like personal growth. Okay. So like, what actions have you taken when you are in a more challenging type situation that have, led to potentially a different or better result than if you had not taken those actions, right? And that doesn't even necessarily need to be like, hey, I really had to overcome something, right? It could be, okay, like I set forth to, to build something, or like, do something within an organization that, to make it better, or that sort of thing, right? Those are all challenges, right? All things that you actually had to take action on, right? And do something. And those tend to be really, where I would, tend to focus, if you're writing about like, in this example, which is, hey, I went to France and I was not happy because like the food was a bit dumbed down. Okay, well, how does that relate to then what you're doing in life, right? Or like, how did that change who you were? Like, did you come back and you were just like, oh, this is so frustrating, so I'm gonna like actually like learn to be a legit French chef, right? Like, is that like an inciting incident for like, you were so upset that you just like became like a French chef, right? That's now that's showing drive, intellectual curiosity, some initiative, right? So different components of this, right? Versus just saying, as a general like philosophical commentary on like the world, right? And to some degree, it's like, who's to say that it was Americanized or not, right? Or maybe the places you're eating, right? Like, so it's like, that's the sort of thing is like, it starts becoming a lot harder to relate to those 5 different traits. It's, in that example, right? And so let me just kind of talk through a couple of these, here. So, figure skating, and shows me probably to be who I am, right? So once again, it's like anytime that you're dealing with athletics or sport, like what I like to do is focus on like, where have you gotten to, right? And where did you start, right? What is the drive, the extra effort, the extra something that you really put in, right? Or in a team type situation, like how did you make your teammates better? Like how did you contribute or lead, in those examples? I see a lot of situations where somebody, is writing about, band is really important to me, or figure skating or sports is really important to me. And they're just like writing about like the teamwork and the camaraderie or how they feel out on the ice. Like that, guess what? How you feel on the ice is not proving whether or not you're going to be successful in college and beyond. It's nice, probably makes for an enjoyable piece to read, but it's not, tying to those successful traits, or it's much more difficult to do that, right? More medical type situations, right? So, ADD, Tourette syndrome, we have overcoming scoliosis, we have a medical diagnosis and overcoming it, right? These are very common essay topics. That doesn't mean you shouldn't write about them, right? Just because it's common, right? Because everybody has a different story, a different way that they approach it, and the different learnings that they took along the way. But really the key is that you're working hard to compensate for something, right? Or to overcome something. And like, what were walk me through like the situation that you were in. Like, how bad was it? Like, how difficult was this? Like, where you started to where you got now, and what were the very specific steps that you took along the way? How did your mindset change in many cases? How you viewed the world, like how you viewed yourself, right? What actions did you take, or what did you do otherwise that you may not have done if you hadn't gone through this? And that tends to be really important, really impactful for the reader. Adoption and forming your own community, right? This could really be about like contribution, right? And kind of forming a community of other people that may have been adopted, or, foster children, or whatever is kind of the situation that you went through there, and right, kind of supporting other people, right? I could see a very compelling essay there, but just kind of writing about like, the adoption itself is not enough, right? The adoption can be an inciting incident for a future, story of personal growth, or like forming this community could be an inciting incident for like, hey, here's what we did with it, right? Here is the success that I had. We have another one, like a child helped create environmentally friendly menus, for local person, right? And she's like really into environmental science, right? So that can be like really compelling, like any sort of like extra initiative, like, hey, I took the initiative to do X, right? But what you really want to focus on, what is the impact of that? It's not just like, okay, I created this environmentally friendly menus. Well, talk to me about like, okay, great. Like, how many restaurants was that for? Like, how many people like dine or use those? What exactly about the menu? Like, what was the impact of those, right? How many trees did it save? Like, these are the sorts of things, or like, did it raise awareness to other people, and what was the impact of that maybe on your community? Did something else happen as a result of this? Like that, those are the types of things that we're looking for, right? Writing about playing the piano, right? Once again, writing about something these are like just writing about your love of music, or love of piano, or love of ice skating is not enough, right? It's more interesting that's, okay, or the piano teacher is a valued mentor. That becomes like, hey, this essay is about the piano teacher, but like, did you write your own music, right? What did you do with the piano, right? Did you go play for other people? Did you start your own band? Did you, there's all sorts of kind of other situations, or maybe what you learned about the piano kind of was an inciting incident for you to go do something else, right? And you can tie it to that, right? And so I could see that as well. achieving as a cisgender Black male dancer in a predominantly female white or gay male environment can be pretty interesting. But you have to talk about like, why was this so challenging? Like, what was the situation that you found yourself within, and did that cause you to struggle in some way, right? And then did that result in you taking different actions that you otherwise would have to lead to some sort of success or understanding about yourself or others, right? Or supporting others, in the community, or like, did it kind of transfer outside of dance, in some way? So, and you have to be very careful with that topic just in general, because it can be a little bit tricky writing about it. But it's really, once again, like, how do you relate to the 5 traits, right? How do you relate it to one or more of the 5 traits? It's really important. Okay, so what's the timeline for working on your essays? Right now, really important to plan your content. Okay, so your students are about to embark on probably the single most valuable summer of their lives. Okay, because over the next few months, they have an opportunity to dramatically improve the content of their applications by just putting some effort in. Okay, sometimes it doesn't even have to be much effort, maybe 5-10 hours a week, right? And this does not even have to do with writing your applications, but rather it's like doing things, taking the initiative, doing things that are going to make for really good content on your applications. Okay, this could be like, what we call like a passion project. Hey, like I really want to learn about X, or I want to engage in Y community, or I really want to become like, start my own blog, or I want to make, my own robot, or, whatever it is. Like there's so many things you could do, but that really matters. And so usually when we start with students, we're identifying and planning their content. What is all the content that you should be writing about in your applications, and how do you make it stronger? So the first time that we meet with the student, we talk about, okay, here's the content you're going to do. Here's some gaps in your content. And like, here's some things you could go do. We're like, let's brainstorm or work through some ideas together on what can you do this summer? What can you do to actually strengthen your content? And this is really important, right? So doing this now, getting started now really matters. Then it's starting your common application essay, which is the most, almost every student's going to be writing this. It's the most common essay that gets written. A lot of times we start this kind of whenever the student's ready to start. A lot of students are starting it this month, others starting in July, some wait till August, because they're like, hey, I'm doing this project or this content, and I want to make sure I have enough time to, have done it enough to write about it. Okay. Well, what's really important is to complete your application for your top choice college in July or August. So like as soon as those supplemental essays or the shorter essays are released, because you want to do this before school starts. And ideally you want to do your applications for your top 3 choice schools before school starts. Because once you're done with that, your top 3 choice schools, a lot of those essays translate relatively well over to the other schools that you need to do and write. Okay. And so that tends to be really valuable. So you're way less stressed going into the school year, and you're really done with most of your like either early action or early decision applications. Okay. So we find like the top 3 schools tends to be the most important, and most important to ideally get done by the time you start school, or just soon, like within the first week or 2 of starting school. And then basically we always work application by application. Okay. Because once you're done with one, then you start transferring that content over into other applications and kind of matching it up. And our coach just kind of help with that process and train students on how to do that. But our entire goal is to get students done early, and we're really quite good at that. Because our students are, tend to be done before they're, the vast majority of them tend to be done with their top 3 choice schools by the time they start their senior year. And we see a lot of students that come to us in September or October, and they're like, hey, I've kind of started working on my essay, or I've thought about this, or I know I'm waiting till the last minute. And then they come to us and they're like, please, can you help us get this stuff done? And they're doing all the work in October, when they also have exams and they also have all the activities that they're supposed to be doing. And it becomes just a lot more stressful and a lot more difficult for the students. Way better to just get it done now or get started now. All right.
Can I also add the other benefit for starting early and having the essays, completed before the student starts school is the student can be applying to potentially some rolling admission schools as early as possible to get that under their belt. They can be applying to, early action schools there are a few that even have early action of October 15th. So, the earlier your student can apply, they start to get their responses or results back. And then you kind of know what direction you're going, whether or not things, things worked out, they got in maybe to some of these early schools and they don't need to do anything more, or maybe they didn't. And now, they have to jump to, plan B, but at least, you have that time, and you have a little advantage by applying early.
Yeah, for sure. We always highly recommend any early action schools, which basically is non-binding. In other words, you'll just find out if you got in, but you don't have to attend that institution. Whereas early decision it's binding and you have to attend the school if you're accepted to it. All right, so let's talk a little about our coaching. Then we can get into some questions. We can look at the essay example. We can talk about highly selective admissions. We can use kind of the time, however people want to focus on it. But in terms of our coaching, like our goal, right? We want you to work smarter, not harder. And basically our primary goal is to have applications you and your student are confident in, that admissions officers will really like. The worst thing that you can have is you send off the application and you're just like, and it's kind of the last minute and you realize that there was an essay that you needed to write 2 hours before the deadline and you're just like scrambling for it. We see this happen pretty frequently for students that we don't work with. And they send that, you're relieved that you sent the application, you're off, but you're like, was it good enough? Is it really my best effort? You don't want to have that situation, because you don't want to be left wondering, like, did I not get in because I didn't put the effort in? Okay. You want to be really confident that what you're submitting is your best work and that you feel really good about it. You also want to make sure you're done well in advance of the deadlines. And then also, like, essays are really stressful. Applications are really stressful. If you haven't been through this with a student yet, there's a lot of fighting that happens. You might be providing a lot of feedback, or being asked to provide feedback on essays. And then when you provide the feedback, your student kind of scoffs at it. The whole goal here is like, we guide the student through the entire application process. Okay. And make sure that they're actually nudging them along the way to get them done. So we're the ones nagging, you're not the ones nagging, and they're creating the timeline with us, and we're keeping them beholden to that timeline. We're like, hey, you agreed to this date, where is it? Okay. And stuff like that, which tends to work really well. As I was mentioning before, so we're actually the top rated college application and essay coaching company globally. You can find some reviews on Trustpilot. It's also on our website. 3 and 4 students we work with get into 1 or more of their reach colleges. 98% of students we work with get into 1+ reach or target colleges. This is quite good because we have zero control over where students are applying, right? We aren't like, hey, don't apply to this school. Like, if you want to apply there, great, go ahead. Right? That's our philosophy. We get many acceptances to every school every single year. We have over 250 high schools actually recommend our essay coaching services, including their counselors. And if you do some research on this, we're half the price or less of comparable options. The main reason for that is, we work with like 6,000 students a year, right? And we have a technology platform that enables this process to be way more efficient for both your student and our coaches that we're working with. And so that's how we're able to do this. And then for students eligible for free and reduced lunch, we have free resources like boot camps and reviews that we give out, that sort of thing as well. In terms of who are our coaches, we always get this question. You're actually more likely to be accepted to every single college in the United States than to be accepted as one of our writing coaches. Okay. And that's because we accept 2% of the thousands of applicants that we get every year, and they go through a very rigorous training and evaluation process. Okay, this is basically how we work with students. The most popular option is one-on-one. We have 2 people that you get assigned. One is an application advisor. This person is responsible for keeping you on track, making sure you're meeting your deadlines, finishing your applications well in advance of deadlines. And then a writing coach that helps the student plan their content and write, basically revise their writing for every application, right? And give feedback on all the writing. We also have small group essay boot camps. Roughly speaking, 5 times as many students use our one-on-one coaching as the small group boot camps. But the small group boot camps are a really good option for students that might not be applying to as selective of schools, or where their essays may not be as important for them. In terms of, we have 2 options for coaching. One is personal statement only. So this is the common application essay, applied Texas essay, or some other personal statement like the coalition app essay. You can do a boot camp, which is great for if you're applying to less selective schools or where essays just tend to matter less. But most students use our one-on-one coaching, which is just unlimited support. So when we say unlimited, we mean unlimited. We do have a plan for here's what we want you to do, but if you need more than that, we just give it. You request more, or our coach says you need more, we just do it. This is a great option for students who have need a strong essay or want a strong essay, but don't have to write a lot of supplements. Okay, a lot of those extra essays that we talked about. And the typical student that we work with gets their personal statement essay, common app essay done within 2 weeks of starting, within less than 8 hours of their own effort, and they receive 4 to 5 hours of one-on-one coaching during that time, which is like video-based calls or written feedback. And students that start with this, you can always upgrade to like complete application essay coaching, which we'll talk about in a second, or you can purchase additional like individual reviews of essays or drafts kind of as needed. So we have some families that do that, like, hey, I bought the one-on-one coaching and then I just need one review of like a YS essay. And so that's a really good option. We have an extra $50 discount on this tonight only. This is the absolute lowest price you're going to get this year, okay, for this. So I just want to be clear on that. Highly recommend doing this or buying this this evening if you get the chance. And then we also have complete application essay coaching. So planning, writing, revising, completing every single written component of every single application that you do. You can do 3 schools, 6 applications, or all of your applications. This does all of your personal statement essays, University of California personal insight questions, your separate essays, any of these school-specific supplements. There's other school-specific essays for like scholarships, honors programs, majors, portfolios, other essays, your activities list, your additional information. It's literally all the written components of the application. And you get unlimited support on that from start to finish. A lot of students, let's say you're using 3 schools, might use 15 to 20 hours of coaching. If you're doing it with all of your schools, you might get 40 or 50 plus hours of one-on-one coaching. And the students, a lot of times, are done in 20 to 50 hours of their own time. I know that looks like a lot, but we see a lot of students that literally spend 2 or 3 times that amount of time because they're constantly like updating or revising or trying to improve their essay on their own without kind of working, as I said, working smarter, and working with a coach through it. So we have an extra for 3 schools. I know this is the biggest discount of the year. The all schools, the biggest discount already happened. So with the 3 schools, highly recommend taking advantage of either of those, especially if you're considering doing this. Just do it this evening. Everything is satisfaction guaranteed. So you get a full refund if after your first coaching call, you're like, hey, this is not for me. Okay, with your writing coach. And why do we do that? Because that never happens, basically. So that's all. Happy to answer any questions about that. You can also just chat us at prompt.com/road to college. There's a chat button in the bottom right. You can also just call us or schedule a time to chat with us, or you can email me directly at brad@prompt.com. That's BRAD@prompt.com. Okay. All right. Debbie, there might be some questions. We can also, which item do you want to do first?
Let me ask this one question, and then let's jump to a sample essay. So there is a question, which I think is fair, that somebody said, can you explain a little bit more how you really are more efficient, working with students than them either A, working on their own, or B, maybe working with somebody else?
Yeah, great question. Let me pull up, where's my, show you. So we have like an entire platform that we use with students. So I can pull that up. So this is the platform that we've developed. Helps that we're like MIT educated engineers. So you can come in here. And so when we work with students, you can, let's say you're going to write your Common App essay. We can add that. We can actually add every single school that we're applying to. And we have every single essay for every single school already in our system. Okay. So number one is we have a great tracking system. And you can see literally all the essays that you need to write for every single school. And we can set, okay, what is like, is this your like top choice of where you want to get into? Okay. We can also see any extra essays that you might want to write, such as if you're applying for like the Bachelor of Business Administration program, we can add those to your list. Okay. Then what we have is we have an entire essay curriculum that works alongside of you and your writing coach. So students come in here and they complete the application plan first before their first call with the writing coach. And this helps them identify and brainstorm a bunch of content. And then our writing coach like dives in deep on all that content basically with you of the experiences that you have brainstormed associated with that. And then what we do is we work with your student and we match that content that they're writing to I don't think I have any content right now, but I can add my own experience here and I can basically map that. So we basically are creating maps of like, here's all the content you're going to write about, and we map that to each of your applications, right? So automatically, like you could see, like we're working a lot smarter here, right? In terms of instead of, you know, what many people might do if you're working with like a typical other essay coach is you'll go to a meeting with them and you're probably going to go through 2 or 3 meetings with the coach before you get to the point where you're going to get to within the first meeting that you would do with us, because we have them like completing a lot of work ahead of time with the meetings that we have. And then we're intelligently taking that content and matching it up to the different essays that they need to write. And then students actually start writing their essay within our system right here. So, and then they submit it for review. Additionally, our coaches are very heavily trained, just like in terms of how we provide feedback to students. And the way that we provide feedback enables them to make a lot of progress a lot faster on the content and structure of their writing, which we focus on first. And then we get to more of the sentence level improvements. Our system, and well as our coaches, also help students kind of match content that is similar or similar essays across the different schools that they're writing. Our system does that as well. And that's something else that kind of helps students along the way. But the main thing is that you're just working with, you're getting support along the way. So you're not like trying to like kind of take 50 different pieces of information across the internet to try to figure this stuff out yourself, right? You're getting somebody that knows exactly, you know, how to approach this and help your student basically through that process.
Okay, that was really helpful. If we want to go through one essay kind of.
Yeah, let's take a look at an essay. Do you actually have one up? Because I don't. Yeah.
I sent you the
okay. You sent me a Google link. Okay, is that in the chat or in my email?
Oh, in the email. Do you want me to?
Okay, I'll just pull it up. Okay, cool. Let me pull that up. All right, essay 1 challenge. So we'll take a look at this and we will rock this one. Okay, 1 second. Fantastic. Okay. Describe a non-academic challenge that you have overcome in the past 2 to 3 years. What did you do and what did you learn? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and read this out loud in the chat. Everybody should drop in. What did you learn? You know, what traits kind of are you seeing? What did you learn about the student? And then what I always like to ask is what didn't you learn that you wanted to learn about the student? Okay. I hiked up a steep mountain to an elevation of 12,444 feet, the sun beating down on me, carrying an 80-pound backpack while rocks slid out from under me in an attempt to make me trip. Our crew of 6 were completely alone in the wilderness for 10 days, and the closest help was miles away. In addition to the physical challenge of hiking a 70-mile trek through Philmont Scout Ranch, I overcame many smaller challenges. Combined these obstacles composed my ultimate mental and physical challenge. Before the trip started, our crew had to undergo extensive training to prepare for the upcoming trek. However, some things couldn't be prepared for, like the extreme altitude and group dynamics of being under stress together for a week. I was the youngest member on our crew and not as physically strong, so the older boys treated me like I wasn't as capable as them with our daily tasks. I was upset at first, but turned the situation around to prove to me that I was just as competent and skilled. I overcame these challenges by changing my mindset from negative to positive. Instead of thinking this is horrible, I'll never make it, I told myself I can't quit. I must look on the bright side, and remembered all the fun I was experiencing during this hike. I thought about the rose-red mountains view across Wilson Mesa, the adventure and the deer along the way. Wade Phillips, who donated Philmont Ranch, said nothing worthwhile was ever accomplished without this will to start and the enthusiasm to continue, and regardless of temporary obstacles, the persistence to complete. Coming home, I remembered his wise words and my sore feet, knowing that I have the strength to carry both a backpack and face any challenge. All right, so what traits did we see? What did we learn about this student? Let's drop that into the chat. Okay, so we have resilient, dedicated and hardworking, drive, perseverance. Okay. So generally speaking, this student hasn't really proven much to me. Okay. And so I know that they went on this hike. A lot of students go on this hike. A lot of students complete this hike. Okay. This student has mentioned overcoming smaller challenges, these obstacles, ultimate physical and mental challenge. What specifically were the challenges? What were the things, right? So there's a couple things that were like jumped out, right? So group dynamics here and being under stress together for a week. Clearly there was some challenge situations there that the student needed to resolve or kind of prove their worth, but I don't know what happened. Like what very specifically happened? What specific actions did the student to take to make their situation better, right? To get these older boys, like treating them, or stronger boys, treating this person better, realizing that this person was going to succeed, right? Did they get lost, for example, along the way? And this kid got out their compass and figured out where they needed to go, or map, right? These sorts of things, could be like explaining, like, what were the actions that they took? Like, how did they actually get to this resolve, right? They say, hey, my mindset changed from negative to positive. What was your really negative mindset? How did it actually change to positive? What were the things, the actions or the thought processes that you went to get there? Okay. Just telling me that happened isn't proving anything to me. Additionally, there's like a couple of other things that we see. There's a lot of descriptive language here that, max 300 words. This is just like a lot of wasted words. Okay. I could probably within one sentence kind of sum up like, hey, I went on the, it's like a 70-mile trek with an 80-pound backpack, at 12,000 foot altitude. Done. Yeah, that's like the entire first paragraph. Right?
A lot of essays that we see get sent in spend too much time on just describing the situation, the scenery.
Not to say you shouldn't kind of set some of that up. We got to do it really concisely. And by the way, that's one of the things that working with a writing coach is so valuable for, is most students, their entire careers in school have been really focused on adding words because they're like, oh, I've been told to write this 3-paragraph or 5-page essay or 3-page essay. And they're like, I've run out of things to think about, right? So they start adding extra sentences in to make it longer. And now all of a sudden with college admissions essays, you have to pack a ton of content and do very small amounts. Right.
They have to actually think the opposite, because the more concise you are, the more space they have to share more about them. So they're actually just giving more information to admissions to know more about the student because they've been so concise in what they've written.
Yeah. So like with this student, like I would probably say it's like, okay, we just talked about all the stuff you should maybe add, right? Where you're unclear. And the typical student would be like, well, I have no space to put that in here. Okay. And then you have to say, well, what would you cut? Or how can we make stuff more concise? Right. And then it's like a lot of what we're doing as writing coaches is training students on how they can actually make their writing more concise, right? How do you actually pick out the important pieces of information and then jam those together maybe into a single sentence, or like, 1 or 2 short sentences in many cases. Another situation here is like, okay, why is this quote here? That's a lot of words. Okay. Generally speaking, you should almost never use quotes in these essays, even though we see that fairly frequently, because it's just extra word count that's not about your own experiences or your own thoughts. Okay. It's kind of like, hey, I want to pull in somebody else that's smart to include in here. Unless there's like a phrase or something that like really had a profound impact on them, or a saying or something that somebody else said that really had a profound impact that then led to a bunch of actions that they took, it shouldn't be included. Okay. So you can just see here, like, as we walk through, like you could basically, whittle a lot of this down to like 1 or 2 sentences to set the scene, focus on what the very specifics of the challenge were, and then the specific actions that the student took to overcome those. Because right now I'm, you see some maybe resilience, maybe a little bit of drive, but like, I'm not getting that in droves, right? This person is like, maybe it's just like another this would be somebody that an admissions officer would say like reads flat, right? So in other words, like just the same as everybody else. Okay.
Yeah. So, Brad, there was a question somebody asked earlier about some specific schools, and schools like Middlebury, Connecticut College, Colby, who don't require supplemental essays. And because they don't require supplemental essays, does that mean that the admissions officers or is placing more emphasis on the Common App essay?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what were we just kind of talking about is like, so there's the academic side and the non-academic side, right? So that non-academics piece, which is made up of your essays, your additional information section, your activities list. Well, if there's only one essay and your activities list, right, naturally that essay kind of needs to say perhaps a bit more, right? Not say a bit more, but like it kind of gets a little bit more weight because there's just less words to talk about the same stuff. Okay. And in certain situations, right, as we talked about before, sometimes the academics or having strong academics can overcome just having like sufficient essays, right, or not as compelling essays, just because of the school that is being applied to and kind of the number of students applying and kind of what the different admissions rates are. But yes, like the easiest way to think about it is, oh, I've got one essay to write. Yep, that essay does really matter, for those institutions, especially some of the ones you're mentioning that can be in some cases a little bit more selective, so like some of these smaller liberal arts programs.
There were also questions earlier about when colleges will have all their supplemental essays available. So, if they're not all available now, should students really be starting to write? Maybe kind of address that timing issue and when, all the schools will have their essays out there.
Yeah, so some schools are starting to release them now, like UVA, I think it was like Vanderbilt. All the essays pretty much are released by August 1st, which is when the Common Application goes live. But we'll have, roughly speaking, like 50 to 100 schools before then. So over the coming weeks, you'll see a lot more of the supplemental essays getting released. Honestly, a lot of this doesn't matter like a lot to you, because you have to do your like Common Application essay first. And if you're applying for the University of California, we usually have you work on those essays second, those University of California personal insight questions, because after you write those essays, which are all 350 words in length, it makes the content that you're writing about there much more easily transferable over to other essays that you might be writing that are shorter on other applications. So we have like an entire kind of, based off of the types of schools you're applying to, like an entire strategy that we typically use with students that, kind of optimizes the amount of time and leads to the best quality of essays that they're going to produce.
Question here. Oh, actually, Laura is asking, can you just go over those packages again briefly and what?
Yeah, let me do that. I was getting in trouble with I left my presentation mode on and then like switched to something else, and like I literally just can't. I have to re-pull it back. So one second. I'm just I went to MIT, but somehow I'm like semi-technologically illiterate sometimes.
And when you pull them up, could you also talk about do people work with the same writing coach?
Yeah.
Run into any issues with the writing coach, maybe just style wise, can they switch?
Yeah. You work with one writing coach the whole way through. If for some reason you and your writing coach are like, you just don't feel like you get along all that well for one reason or the other, you can, just talk to us, and or if you're having any challenges, like we can switch writing coaches. That's something that we can do. On the front end, we try to match you with a writing coach that we feel will be a really good fit. So the first step in our process is that you meet with your application advisor, and we try to understand your goals, like what are you, types of programs you're applying to, the types of schools you're applying to, like when you want to get started, that sort of thing. And we use that information to basically assign you to a writing coach that we think that you'll work really well with. And our hit rate on doing that is extremely high, right? It's very rare that somebody asks to switch, but you can, right? If you do believe that's a challenge. We have over 100 writing coaches that work with students every year. And that's one of the other benefits that we have is that, our writing coaches support, this is their primary job in the fall. Okay. For many of them. Right. So it's not like they're, each coach is just working with like 2 students, right? It's, a lot of coaches are really putting in 10, 20, 40 hours a week, right? into writing coaching, across students that they're working with, which is really beneficial because that means that they've seen a lot more. Our writing coaches have worked with a lot more students, worked on a lot more essays, provided feedback on a lot more essays, and have had success, getting students into a lot of, top institutions. So just again, like to refer is like, we have kind of 2 options. You can just work on your personal statement essay with us, like the common application essay. This is a really good option. And we suggest, if you're, let's say it's like a Middlebury or that type of institution where you're like, hey, I think the essay is going to matter like a good amount. The one-on-one coaching program really makes a difference there. The small group essay bootcamp, where you're in a group of up to 8 students and you're discussing these different things, you're planning your writing, you're getting 2 rounds of written feedback on your drafts. That's also another good option, especially for students that want to just have like good, strong, solid essays and they feel like, hey, this is, you may want to spend a bit less. But that's also potentially, we have a lot of students that do that, but more students do the one-on-one coaching.
There was a question earlier about the one-on-one coaching. Does that include the brainstorming of what the?
Oh yeah. It's from the beginning to the end of the process.
The student doesn't have to come with.
You could come with nothing, right? Well, you don't have to do anything right now, but before your meeting with your writing coach, you will complete an assignment. And that assignment usually takes an hour and a half to do within the platform, that application plan that we talked about. And that will make those conversations that you have with your coach just so much more powerful and better to getting to the place where you're starting your essay there. So usually the first call that you do with us is usually lasts about an hour and a half. And we go over and brainstorm all of your content. And if we still have time left over, we plan what you're going to write about for your common application essay. You write your first draft of that essay. You get written feedback on that draft of your essay, and your coach may recommend, or you may request to do a short video call with the coach to go over the feedback and start implementing it. And you implement that feedback. You submit it again, you get more written feedback, you revise it, you get more written feedback, you revise it. And by this time, you're usually about done with your essay. You submit it for what we call a final check, right? To make sure that it's all good and set and ready to go. So that's generally the process that we work for with students. And as I said, kind of across everything that they do, it's really about 8 hours of their time, maximum of about 2 weeks. Some students get it done much faster than that, like within a week. And you can always upgrade to getting complete application support if you want to, or you could purchase individual reviews within the platform. You can do that too. They're $99 each. But if you're going to think about doing the complete application support, we highly recommend just doing that now, because you're going to get a bigger discount now, because when you upgrade later, that discount may not exist. And if it's in September or October, that list price that you see first, which is like that $599 price in this case, is actually much higher. So we increase prices as we get closer to the deadlines.
And actually, there was a question earlier. Somebody asked if my child really can't start until August. Can I purchase it now
yes.
and start it later?
Yes. So and that goes for the small group boot camps or the one-on-one. Small group boot camps, we basically have multiple dates per month that we will send you a message about, and you can select a date, and if one of those doesn't work for you, we're always adding more dates, so you can always do that. And then for the one-on-one, we ask you when you want to start, okay? And then we line up your call with your application advisor. We go through all of that, and we work out your essay timeline. And sometimes some students start with, okay, let's start now, at least doing the brainstorming, so you can identify what else you could be doing over the summer, and then we're going to pick up and actually start your essay, writing your common application essay later. Some students do that as well. So it's really kind of up to you, and you'll be put in touch with your application advisor and have a conversation with them to plan this. Basically, as soon as you sign on with this, you'll get a link to sign on for a call with your application advisor soon after that. Okay, but If you're going to do this, I highly recommend just doing it now, right? And signing up to start now, because we can also like slot you in for your preferred kind of start date to get started with essays. A lot of students start at the beginning of August with us. So better to get that now, because we also have like limited amounts of sometimes numbers of students that could start each week. That's not a problem right now when you get signed on, but like if it's like, hey, let's say it's the end of July and you want to start the next week, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging. Obviously, we always try to accommodate, but the best thing to do is just to get started now if you can. And then the complete application support, we recommend if you're applying to like selective or highly selective institutions. So, this is like top 15 to 50, potentially on the rankings of US News, and you're applying to multiple of those. It's a really good choice. 3 schools, honestly, is just like a really good deal, because a lot of students are able to get through their top choice applications, and then students might feel pretty confident with transferring or translating some of those essays that they've written for those top choice schools on their own to the other applications, or you can upgrade later. Now that might be a greater fee, but we have a lot of students that just are like, hey, I just want support on my top 3 choice schools. On the website, you'll also see, if you click and see kind of the different product options, you can even get 6 schools is also an option, which also has a discount and has a price kind of between the 2 options. All schools is, we recommend if you're applying to, let's say, a lot of times like the students that are doing that are applying to 5, schools within that are like the top 15 rankings a lot of times. So many Ivy League institutions or MIT or Stanford, a bunch of like University of Michigan, UNC Chapel Hill, like you start kind of adding a lot of those institutions on, and some of those students are applying to like 10 or 15 of those, right? So that's kind of where that would, kind of fall. But if you're only applying to like maybe one or two of those as kind of reaches, the 3 schools option may be really, really a good choice for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answers that.
I think so.
All right. We could dive in. We've been at this for an hour and a half. The stuff on highly selective admissions, I think we've already touched on quite a bit.
Yeah, I think you kind of
did. I mean, the other stuff we'd be looking at is just way more data and graphs and charts, which are super interesting to me, but a little less relevant to everybody here. All it does is basically shows just how hard it is.
It's just a reiteration of what you said with maybe with a little bit more.
Yeah, a lot more data. So I don't think that's necessary. But are there any kind of like final questions that we have? As I said, please take advantage of these discounts if you want to ahead of time, or at least like if you have other questions, book a call with us, send me an mayil at brad@prompt.com.
And let me just say, we actually had a session like this in May. So, a lot of families have already started, but this is like the sweet spot, June. I would really recommend, students get started for all the things we already mentioned, but you just, don't want to be in that stressful situation in August or September when you have the opportunity to start things now.
My favorite part of this is you do this and then you're like, hey, I know essays and like application support, like it's covered, right? You still have to work on, sometimes like school selection, that sort of thing. But the real meat of this is, you're in good shape and you'll have a lot of success with. Okay.
And somebody just asked, how long is this discount in place? So truly, right. You see there's 2 crossouts that Brad has on these slides. So the price there is only available until tonight. I mean, a little fudge is that it depends when Brad's engineers wake up in the morning. It may be still around at 1 a.m. 2 a.m. 2 a.m.
Yeah, it'll probably be around at like 2 a.m. It probably gets turned off around between 9 and 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning.
Right.
But I'd highly recommend taking advantage of this evening if you're going to do it. That first crossed out price, that's the price it will revert to after that. And so there's still a discount through Sunday, but if you're going to do this, we highly recommend doing it tonight. As I said, it's fully guaranteed. So that means that, if you're not happy, after having your call, first call with your coach, you can get a full refund. And for some reason you're not happy, like later on in the process, which as I said, basically never happens, there may be opportunities for partial refunds, and we have a full refund policy that, you know, we can chat through or we can provide to you if you're interested in understanding that. You know, as I said, we work with thousands and thousands of students that have a lot of success with us, and it's very personalized, right? The key is that we're marrying like a really strong technology platform with really good writing coaches that are very rigorously trained in exactly how to do this, and we have a lot of quality control, and like we're following up and we're keeping you on track, right? So we have a separate person that is literally making sure everything gets done and done on time and done well, right? Which is your application advisor. So as I said, highly recommend doing this. I know Debbie's, I think it was your son that worked with us a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Time flies.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's 2 years ago. I was like, maybe it's 2 years ago now. So to a lot of success. So yeah. All right. Very good. Any final questions that rolled in? Or we
Nope, the only question was, do discounts end on Sunday? And they do end on Sunday. So.
Yep. All good. And if for some reason you sent me a direct message and I did not respond, it's because I did not look at the chat the entire evening. And if you have a question, just email me at brad@prompt.com. All right.
Great. Well,
thank you all very much for your time this evening.
And let me just say, it's almost like a magic act. The essay that I gave Brad, he truly had never read before. So I love that he can kind of like do it on the spot.
Yeah, that's what I always do. I don't like seeing stuff ahead of time. So.
Right.
But all of our writing coaches are like that. Just all of them. It's you know, this is how we test people. So
yeah, it's good.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. All
Okay.
right, bye.
Bye.